call this meeting to order. And if you'll all please stand and join me in the Pledge to Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, changes to the agenda. Do you want to, I think we have some changes to consent, but when we get to consent, we'll do it then? Sounds okay. All right, great. Then no changes. Let's go on to public comments.
All right, I will put the public comment policy up on the screen for everybody to read. So feel free to give this a read before you make your comment. If you would like to make a public comment, you can just use the hand raise feature on your screen, first name, last name, and town of residence before you make your comment, please. All right, I'm not seeing anybody, so.
Okay, thanks, Nick. All righty, then.
Can I make a public comment?
Sure.
Charlie Eicher, Range. I'm speaking as a Range resident. And I would like to thank board members, Patty Farmer and Marcia Gustafson Belte for the last 3 years of servicing our community and going through some rough times with COVID. And
Alicia.
I also want to thank Alicia, but Alicia may be with us. So at this point in time, hopefully she'll be back. Otherwise,
Thank you for
So
done
either
so
way, I'll have to come to the next meeting to get thanked. Is that what you're saying?
Anyway, I want to thank everybody for spending the last 3 years going through some rough times with COVID. And we certainly know that you're not paid for all the time that you put in. And just want to thank you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I would just like to make the same comment or let's say a similar comment. It has been a tough time, and three of you deserve a lot of credit, and it's been a pleasure working with you.
Thank you.
And like Charlie, I'm hopeful that we can give Alicia more trouble next year to deal with. But Patty and Marcia, it's good to know that you're both in the community and both going to be a part of things going forward in your own ways. So
Thanks. Thanks. I mean, a part of me wants to say it's been a pleasure. But another part of me is like,
feel free.
why? That's not true. But working with you all has been a pleasure. It's been a rough few years. It has. And I think our families all know that we carry it with us beyond these hours that we sit here. So
Very true.
but it's been well worth it, for sure.
It has, and I think for me, it truly shows that we are a community that's committed to education, because I learned a lot, and I think that it's not just our students who learn things, and hopefully our parents and families, grandparents, aunts and uncles, all of them have a chance to learn something from this district. And I will rest now and contemplate what all occurred in the last 3 years. And I really have learned a lot, and I appreciate everyone's dedication. That is above and beyond what anyone could ever understand. We definitely, we have tried very, very hard in the last 3 years.
Well, I'll say I agree with Patty that it has been such a learning opportunity. When my kids became school age, I thought, well, I want to be involved in their education somehow. So I guess I'll just run for the school board. And it's been so much more than I ever could have imagined. And I have learned so much. And I'm thankful for what I've learned and the ways that I've been able to contribute, not only for my own children's education, but for all of the learners in our district. I'm really proud to call this district home, and so much of that is because of this board, and I hope to be a part of it for years to come. But if not, I can rest knowing that the children in this district are in good hands. So thank you all for your service as well.
Thanks. Okay, now it's your turn. And you can just thank us as well.
Yes,
Okay?
no.
Just keep-
I'd like to thank everyone over here to my right who's staying with me, and everyone here to my left who, no, it really actually has been a really great 3 years, the last 3 years. And when I say that, there are obvious struggles that we have had. COVID-19 has been very difficult, I think, for everyone involved. 19, 20, 21, exactly. And we still are certainly dealing with some of those elements. And then other, other items that have continuously come at us and that will always be there in public education. It's just it's a political place. And we just keep what I appreciate over the past 3 years, if I'm going to kind of narrow it down, is we stayed focused. We stayed focused on kids, on the learning of kids, on making certain that we were doing everything to help them thrive in their lives and communities. I can't think of a decision that we made in these last 3 years, and many of them were very difficult, but we stayed true to that focus. And this board was something special that way. So we'll miss a couple of you. We might miss more, we'll see, but I hope that we'll be able to continue moving on, and I know that we'll continue working together for the betterment of the school district and for the community at large. So thank you. And thank you for hanging in there. All right. So my superintendent report tonight is going to focus not on COVID-19. I will say that we still have some cases. It's being reported on our website. I think we had around 10 or so last week. We've had 4 today in the district, but just, most days it's 1 or 2 in the past couple of weeks. One item that we wanted to kind of talk about, and it's not just one item, but it's a variety of items, but one subject area is facilities. Really with the work that we've done this past year from the very beginning, right? I think you could even define much of this year with facilities, a focus on facilities. Like, oh goodness, we have to fix some things that are just old and broken. Oh, what can we do to improve our facilities to make it a little bit nicer, a little bit more conducive to learning? What can we do to make this a better learning environment all around? And then how can we plan that out in the years to come? And so there's been some planning, but there's still some uncertainty as we go into tomorrow's session saying, all right, well, a lot of our future decision-making is going to be impacted by the decisions made tomorrow in a couple of these warrant articles. And so, regardless of how it goes tomorrow, we still have to keep pressing forward. And on I believe it's the 14th of this month, that date correct? Nope, 17th, sorry. On the 17th of this month, we'll be having kind of a resurrection of the Building Improvements Committee. And that group is going to see many of these items right here. So we'll be talking about HVAC, restrooms, which of course we took off the warrant. We know what the history is on that, but just we won't focus a lot of the time on that, but just to show that we still have information that we can use. And then an auditorium, we talked about a little bit. A wellness center is a possibility. Looking back in history, just to compare some decisions from the past and maybe some decisions now and for future thought. And then lastly, the Cte renovation update. We voted as a board to move forward with trying to renovate our building trades area. There have been a couple hiccups. I went to a meeting last Friday and we'll discuss that. So this first slide shows just basically the work that we intend to do, that we'll be talking about tonight, that we'll be hopefully making some motions about entering into an agreement and getting a lease and so forth, obviously contingent upon the warrant passing tomorrow. But this is just a reminder that it's an expensive project, over $4 million, but it's necessary. These items, these rooftop units, even the units that are internal to the school, but especially the rooftop units, are all at the end of life. They certainly got there a little bit sooner than perhaps they needed to be because of the last couple of years of wear and tear. We certainly put them through quite a ringer over the past couple of years, but this is a major upgrade for the facility, for the air quality, for the health and wellness of individuals. And it is a lot of money. And we know because that work is happening right now in both elementary schools, but we're getting that grant funded. So if we can get this work done, it's going to take 1.5 years, maybe upwards of 2 years. We're talking about having spent nearly $8 million on HVAC alone. And that's, I want you to hold that number in your head as we go through this. So the next several slides, we're not going to spend a lot of time on these. You have these documents, you can go online as well and you can blow it up because these are very small numbers. You might have a difficulty in seeing them, but the purpose was not necessarily to go through and talk about them, but rather show the number of these next 3 slides, the number of bathrooms, the toilets, the fixtures, what roughly would be proposed in different ones. You can see that some bathrooms cost $65,000 to renovate. Some are closer, need an overhaul and are about $120,000. So it adds up. And by the end of the project that we had hoped to do this coming summer, but that's not going to take place now. We pulled it again off the warrant. It was about $3,255,908, give or take 100,000 here and there, and we could have adjusted numbers within this within these slides. But I did still take this information and I did the initial documentation for building aid back in January. So that's still something that we can go forward with later on if we want to get all the plans and kind of put that forward come June, July. Another project, if we can go past all the slides on the restroom upgrades, Nick. Yep, is we talked about an auditorium and the importance of the arts and of having a location for our learners to be able to present and to be able to provide concerts and so forth. An auditorium, I think this is a 400-seat auditorium, but an auditorium is very much needed in schools, a high school, a middle school. In this case, we have a high school and a middle school without one of these. And so it's certainly an area of, I would say, academic need, and I think of school pride and community pride. That being the case, how that is done, whether it's building that new or renovating another space, there could be a lot of different things that we could kind of talk about, and that's what we'll be discussing a little bit on the 17th of March. And certainly anyone in the audience here tonight, if you are not on that committee and you want to attend that meeting and be part of it, everyone's welcome. March 17th, 5:30 to 7 p.m. We're going to meet in the high school, middle school library.
Is it gonna be Zoomed in already?
We weren't planning on that because it's going to be fairly informal, and
Okay.
we'll have, as we go down the road, decisions might be made to do a lot more of that broader communication, depending on what we're talking about, feeling we can do. Other conversations, if we go to the next slide, was if we did a new auditorium, what might we do to the gymnasium to expand the space? Do we do something different with the floor? That floor is taking a massive beating. Or do we do something in reverse? Do you do a wellness center and new gymnasiums and provide the school with all the resources that you need? Because that, we certainly are under-resourced in this area, and then you renovate another area for an auditorium. As we look at some pricing later on, you'll see that it's actually cheaper to, by a long shot, about $100 per square foot. It's cheaper to build a gymnasium than it is an auditorium. And so that can come into play as well with how you might want to go forward. And that's all, of course, if we're looking at staying here on this square footage that we are in. And obviously, along with considering some new facilities to add on potentially, we would also have to be saying, how do we keep everything up that we need to? How do we deal with the pipes? How do we deal with making sure that the tiles, that need to replace are replaced? So all of those types of, maintenance and some smaller kind of planning that we would have to put forward to make sure that we are operating properly would have to all be done as well at the same time. The next slide is just a picture of something that I hadn't seen much of, but at one point in time, at early 2000s, a new school project was put forward. And there are a couple of different variations of this school project, but this is just one of them. And that was to go on the square footage over, that was 100 acres actually, over at between Ringe and Jaffrey, or sharing Ringe and Jaffrey on 202. And I've walked that property. We have dug up some other documentation on this and the core sampling that was done over there. And we are currently slated to have some work done on that property to thin, some of the wood, some tree work and so forth, and then get some revenue for that, so that we can return to taxpayers. But if we go to the slide after that, this is what we found. And I know that, again, people who have been here longer have seen these numbers before. They've seen this. I hadn't really. And I looked at this and went, oh, wow. When there was building aid, first and foremost, at a time when some renovations to this place, along with building new out there, it could have, even give or take $1 million, it could have been more expensive than what this is saying in the long run. You never know what you run into, whether you hit ledge or something like that. But next year would have been the final payment, and it would have cost the district under 10 million, or around $10 million to have done that. That would have been a new high school, about 90,000 square feet. Well, actually, I've seen the drawings. It wasn't with the pool. It was outlined where a pool could go. But it did have, interesting enough, and this is why I put that other information in before, because the school district knew it should have had an auditorium and another gymnasium space along with whatever existed here, because they planned for that. Those were in the plans. So unfortunately, when it was not passed, that auditorium, that focus on the arts was taken away. And I think that was, well, it was unfortunate, in my opinion. It's unfortunate that we're spending close to $8 million in HVAC across the school district, not just for one school. And things have gotten more expensive. That's just the way it is. But when you look at that and you realize a whole new building for that still would have to have, money put into it at this point in time, 20 years later, but just it's a different conversation at that point in time. And I'd like us to be thinking about, well, at this point, when you're talking about $395 per square feet on the very bottom of that, or $275 to $395, $395 is usually like the auditoriums are on the higher end of that, gymnasiums on our lower end. If you were to kind of even go in the middle of that and to build a whole new facility, if you're to just do a high school, you're talking not this amount, you're talking 35 to 40 million, maybe 45 million, no building aid or very little building aid. If you were to do this entire school, middle school and high school, and you were to go about 200,000 square feet for that, it would be closer to 70. So 75 million. which is roughly what we had talked about. I said 60 to 80 was what I had found is kind of the norm right now with schools this size right here. So that's a lot of money, but let's also at least entertain the conversation. But 10 to 15 years from now, what will that be? What will we say? What will we be saying? What will they have wished we had perhaps done? I don't know. But the conversation needs to take place. And that's why the 17th is going to start a little bit more of. This, if I go down 2 slides, I don't think we need to go to, I mean, yeah, we can go to the Turner scope of work. We just have some, we have money to be using for architectural work. Some things here we might not need to do still or want to do, and we might want to kind of bundle them to doing the work we want them to do. So that's going to be part of the conversation on the 17th and beyond. And if we go to the last slide, this is a kind of a timeline for the building project for the ATC or the CTE programming. The Department of Education is taking the stance that they are there to fund the renovations and or some new construction perhaps for existing CTE sites. They are claiming that there is one site and that this is not one of them, and Messinic is not one of them. Back in the 1995 version of our agreements, it was a little bit clearer that at least Jaffrey was considered to be a site. We are still, you know, all sending districts, and we receive, and there's money that goes back and forth from districts, but we are not in the document a CTE center. And so the Department of Education is going on that. We can fight it. That's one avenue. You can get our lawyers to go forward and try to fight that. Another avenue is to have the conversation about what do we want to support going down the road. There's an idea that was on the table this past Friday in a meeting that I had in Peterborough of considering just a standalone, apart from the schools, regional technology center. So building new. I, of course, said that we have 100 acres. Interestingly enough, apparently we all have 100 acres. Messinic has that as well, and so does Peterborough has some space as well, or at least in the Conval district, maybe Peterborough not itself. So on April 1st. I have a meeting set up, and it's with the superintendents and a board representative, I would say school board chair at the time, but we don't know where that lies because, you know, we don't vote on a school board chair in the normal voting that happens after the fact by nomination afterwards. Yeah, so we will have to wait for a couple of weeks for that, but April 1st will be a meeting that we have scheduled to go to the Conval area to start having these discussions. This is going to be, it's reported to be the last time that the 75% state matching, basically for CTE, they'll pay for 75% of the construction costs for whatever we do in this area. And I think that that's going to go away. That's what's being reported anyway. And that it's going along the lines of how building aid has gone, more for just smaller projects, need to do projects, that sort of thing, instead of big renovations.
Supporting real change.
Yes, yes.
So is the state saying that Conval is the one school that would get the funding, or does Messina get the funding? Because don't we have 3 separate schools that do separate things?
They're saying
Yeah.
one site.
So who is the site?
Besides Conval.
Conval is named as the kind of where the CTE center is housed. That is where the finances all run through and everything. So we're kind of a satellite. Yeah. So we'll talk more about that, talk more about our options, and then the idea of would we support perhaps even something that's not necessarily there, but somewhere else that we all could take part in.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think I think Messina has a lot of thoughts. I think that we would probably have some thoughts, and
Lots of thinking.
we have a little bit of thinking and planning to do. Yep.
Ruben, when you say that, we could fight this, have you had any contact with the district's, attorneys so far? Or is this something that we can win?
Oh, I don't have enough information to say if we can win or not. I've read through our own documentation and can see that how the interpretation was, how the NHDOE arrived at their interpretation of that. Could we win? We also have looked at the fact that there have been other places that have received funding for a variety of sites, satellite sites. So do I think it can be done? Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, it depends. What I haven't seen is I haven't seen their agreements. Yeah.
the site that we do have here, where we have our building trades, that has, in my understanding, been considered a part of the
Mhm.
CTE.
It is.
It is. a part. So I guess the question I'd have is, does it make sense for us to go forward with our planning so that sometimes facts on the ground can have an influence on the
Mhm.
decisions that are made. So,
Yeah. No, I think that if we go on April 1st and have some more conversation, we'll get more information. We'll kind of see where everyone's feeling. And then we'll know better how to move forward. I'd hate to get our attorneys involved prematurely because it costs a lot of money every time I give them a call or send them an email. And I would want to have all our ducks in a row prior to doing that. We have a little bit of time. Not, you kind of want to get some plans going, being put into place even this summer. Initial plans.
Ruben, if I'm not mistaken, the high school project that you showed us.
Sure. You want to go back a couple slides, Nick? That would be great. To that picture
There you go.
with the apparently it was gonna be done in the winter time, and it's gonna be snow everywhere.
This was before global.
Yeah,
warming,
this is
so-
making sure we didn't have to worry about landscaping.
So I believe that this project did include plans for a CTE building.
Mhm.
Because at the time, even though there was one at Conval, there was an option being discussed for Jaffrey Ranch to have one as well.
Mhm.
And so when this went down, I think that went down with it.
Yeah, there are a couple different variations of these plans. There was one that was a lot longer and kind of wrapped around a little bit more. This one looks like the one that was going to be voted on right here. I think that's what it was. It's a little more traditional to, it's a little more traditional to what some other newer schools have gone. Like if you go to like a Exeter High, which is about what, 12, 15, actually probably it's now 15 years old at this point in time. It looks very similar in structure to that.
So Ruben, this is 19 or 20 years ago because there were, I
Yeah.
think, 3 different votes.
Yeah.
But my recollection is that at least one of the votes missed by only a handful.
Very
One
close.
vote, was it?
It was a
So that means you
small
have
number of
basically
votes.
60% of the people voting yes and 40% voting no, but by one vote.
Yep.
Done.
Yeah.
Wow.
So just some history.
Should've, could've.
It's a question to think about. What would our community and our kids right now who are going to remain in this community think 20 years from now?
Mhm. Fun exercise.
5 years from now, who knows? And that's the report for tonight.
All right. Well, that's depressing. Thank you.
Not necessarily depressing. There's possibilities.
There's
There's
possibilities. There are
possibilities.
possibilities, but when you really think about, aid and plans and having the land and where we'd be now. Yeah, okay, I'll stop thinking of that. All right, yes.
I have a question. I guess it's something for us to think about because, we've worked so hard on putting together these warrant articles, and 20 years ago, a different board worked so very hard to get the idea of a new high school built. And yet when we go out in public, people don't seem to understand what the warrant articles are about. They don't understand why they're needed. And so I'm wondering, as a board, what is it? Like, how do we communicate this stuff better? I understand we have the sessions and it's in the newspaper, but what are we missing? How can we sell this? Like, not that it's something that's, we're not asking for a new robotics center. We're asking for heat for the high school.
And not even cooling, just heat and dehumidification.
Yeah, and with it's
Clean
my
air.
understanding that these new HVAC systems will be far more energy efficient and that we will be using less fuel, less
Energy.
propane and petroleum. Is that correct?
Very likely. That being said, if you're adding the dehumidification to it, then you're talking about higher electricity bills. And electricity right now, as we've just found out through paying a bill, is really high right now.
But having said that, we would also be tying in our current boiler, our
The current
Biomass
project,
boiler.
and the current project we're doing right now is also going to take care of a portion of that. But to make sure that we're more reliant, or we're able to be reliant upon our wood system.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was thinking that as well this week around, how do we and how can we? And I know that one place is like at the different chambers, going to meetings of those, but they, for the past couple of years, have been like remote and few and far between, rather than on a regular monthly basis. So even that avenue, which I think has been a pretty traditional avenue of talking to people, right? Sometimes in a formal way and other times just informally being there and saying, hey, yeah, we're working on this, or that kind of thing. It hasn't been as afforded to us. But that is one way that I think about.
Yeah,
So-
I didn't think there was an easy answer. I just,
Yes.
I'll give you a Midwestern view, okay?
Please.
It starts with athletics.
Yeah.
You have very strong booster clubs, all right, and they pour money into athletic facilities, athletic uniforms, athletic travel, all right, and then that expands, okay? Because they're good at raising money. They have businesses there that contribute. Every business has their billboard or their sign or whatever. There are flags hanging from the light posts going in up Main Street. But no, the community is very, very involved in athletics, and that seems to be the place that starts the bonding. And then they develop pride in their school system. And then the next thing you know, you started out with a turf football field with a huge electronic scoreboard with video and so forth. And then that expanded into an automobile shop where we've got, multiple bays of automobiles. And then that expanded into an auditorium. And instead of one gymnasium, we have 4 gymnasiums. And the whole idea of it being a great school system started with athletics, and that started with competition, because the neighbor town does this neighbor town does that. You meet on the field, if you beat them, that's last year, so. But anyway, the Midwest does an awful lot around athletics.
Mhm.
Well, it is a way to get the community more directly involved and aware of the issues with our facilities and helping to perhaps join committees. I just don't know.
Nick, our communications coordinator, is in the audience tonight. I didn't know if he had any thoughts that he had been thinking about regarding something.
Yeah,
like
I
this.
mean, Charlie brings up a good point. It doesn't necessarily have to be around athletics, but just culture is huge, and just getting people the more people that you can get that are just universally supportive of the district and what we're doing, the more likely you'll have somebody that will just throw their support behind, whatever it is that we're recommending. I think that there isn't any one answer, because obviously if there was just one thing, we would have already done it and we'd be there. I think that there's a lot of different things that we can do. I think that a lot of it does come with promotion of the things that we're doing better, that we're, fixing, so on. Unfortunately, social media plays a really large role, and a lot of social media we can't really control. Just going through certain Facebook pages and groups, there's a lot of misinformation in there, and it could be a full-time job just having somebody monitoring community pages and responding to things that are not necessarily correct. So that's tough. So, I mean, obviously, I think the more that we can just continually kind of do to grow and expand and just show the community that we're doing that. And I know there's been conversations at the board level of like, okay, it's great that we've promoted this initiative, in a school board meeting, or we've talked about it, but, showing the community the result of that work. So obviously a lot of that does and can fall on me in terms of just working with our schools and administration to show a lot of that, those things that are improving. I think that the more people that we can have that support us and kind of go out and are, cheerleaders for the district, and are able to, maybe combat misinformation or just to in general promote good things that are going on. Because obviously, even if you have somebody, you could hire a whole PR firm to spend 2-3 people spending time promoting things, and you still wouldn't be able to promote everything that's going on. So I think that ultimately it's just a question of how do we continually just show the good work that we're doing? How do we show it in different ways? Because we've even seen through like adding in live stream functionality, there's nobody in the public here tonight, and there hasn't really been for a while. And I get that COVID could be a factor, but we didn't really have people in the audience before. We'd be lucky to get 3-4 people, and usually half the time back when I was a reporter, I was one of those 3 to 4 people. We have 8 people in our digital audience right now, so that's 8 people that we don't have here that tuned in. Then you look at putting it up on our YouTube page, that pulls in an additional 20 to 50 views. So while that's not monumental in terms of an impact, that's showing that those additional steps have affected 20 to maybe 100, 200 people, just to inform them about what's going on at a school board meeting.
And to be fair, during COVID, when we've had the streaming ability, there are times when we've had over 200 people attend.
Yeah, there's been
meetings.
multiple meetings that we've
So
gone over
that
100,
has
200.
been a huge, I think, way of getting information out. I also just want to concur that you used the example of athletics, but I think something that the communities can be excited about and get behind. So first time I took kids to, it wasn't Destination Imagination, then it was Odyssey of the Mind, global competition. We raised $20,000 in 6 weeks because these kids had the opportunity. They were in the paper. The mayor of the selectmen of Ringe, they did this event out at Cathedral of the Pines, and they like proclamated an Odyssey of the Mind Day, or, you know, that kind of thing. So it was a lot of PR getting it out, and a lot of people hearing about it and then supporting it. And being very excited for the opportunity of these students. And it was a competition, but it wasn't an athletic type thing. But it's the same idea. It's about having something that people can get behind. It's very tangible.
School community pride.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely part of it. I think our students don't know what's going on in these meetings. They don't know that we're advocating on their behalf.
We haven't had a student.
We haven't had a student rep, but we also, I mean, I had to tell a student, they were complaining about the air quality, they were complaining about the heat, the inconsistency. And I said, but this is why, this is exactly the warrant article. We want to resolve this. We've actually done a lot of work in it. But I feel like it's a little late. And in terms of like, how do you help the students, help the parents understand what we're trying to accomplish? So that's definitely, that as an audience that we should be engaging.
So I'm hearing some good thoughts coming out here, and I know that Nick has done a lot working with the press to try and get stories that are representative of what we're really doing. And I think we should continue with that. It would be nice to get the Sentinel and the Ledger Transcript sort of on board with helping us. And, you know, they have their own purposes, obviously, but if we're feeding them information, maybe that will help. But Charlie's idea about, you know, booster clubs, I mean, that is true. You know, it's, I don't think people would object to being involved in, you know, improving our schools. And we really don't have that too much, you know, at least not on a formal basis. Like this building committee you're talking about, Ruben, that's going to meet on the 17th. That's a role that committee can play. And if we use it that way, it's a way to get the word out. Certainly, we realized 2 months ago that we had a couple of really important projects that we identified. Even before we knew how expensive it was going to be for Jaffrey. But we realized that we needed to find a way to get the word out. But we don't have a mechanism that's really easy. So maybe we should start doing that. You know, trying to get a group of parents together or a group of other community leaders together who would help us promote the schools.
And as I was saying, the chamber, they have had an education committee. COVID, again, kind of ground everything to a halt. But I know that they want to get that going again. Because I, wearing a different hat, attend those meetings occasionally. And I was talking with Steve Pelkey about that, so.
That's a great idea.
He really would like to get involved, get the schools involved in some things, so. That two-way street going.
Ruben, I don't know if we've been digressing from
Yes.
your report, but in the same line, there's a bill right now that's like halfway through the process of going through for public school infrastructure fund. Kind of, there's been a moratorium on money, and I read that there's like $650 million in New Hampshire schools, people waiting to get funding who've applied for things. But they are revamping it. They are looking to do that. And this bill in particular kind of starts it off saying that anybody applying would have to have a long-range capital improvement plan. And now I know that you bring us things and that John brings us a lot of things, but do we actually have, and is that something that we can really get off the ground, is having a actual long-range strategic plan for, yes, we know we have all this to do. And maybe that's part of the reason why it was so overwhelming this year, trying to figure out how do we put all this into warrant articles? How do we put this in the budget? You know, is there some way we can put it forward into
Mhm.
some things so that should money open up,
Mhm.
which couldn't happen, but should federal and state money open up, we're ready. Like can get it right off because we have the plan. We have these first steps already done.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we have what I would consider, we have 5, 10, 20-year spreadsheets of how, like, from each school and how they would be funded and so forth. The items there keep on changing, which is why I said it's important we kind of see what happens on like tomorrow, because that's going to allow us to then, all right, here's like items like, here's where our doors are going to be replaced. Here's our window replacement cycle. Here's those things. And then where can we stick the big ticket items if we want to go forward? And then it's the big ticket items that you'd want to then write about so that your plan has a little more body to it from the standpoint of interest, not just we're going to fix these things and maintain our facilities. I think we have a lot of information. We've had engineering studies and so forth. We have all of that ready to roll, but we could put something in place like, today. And then as a result of tomorrow, we could be like, no, well, now this is going to be, these 3 years instead. So we're just trying to right now still get down to kind of that baseline of what we're looking to do. But you're correct that if that bill were to pass, they would mandate that piece, which is good.
Kind of gives hope that there might be money.
Well, yeah, well,
Let's hope.
Well, it's interesting that even if that doesn't pass, that is one of the things that the Jaffrey Selectmen asked of us.
Mhm.
I should say the town manager and the selectmen. We did have a walkthrough with them after the budget hearing. And it was before the deliberative session. Well, we invited the selectmen and the town manager to come meet with John Leclerc and, ask any questions they might have about the project. And one of them took us up on it. And the others said, well, if there's two of us, that would constitute a meeting, so we shouldn't do that. But we had the town manager and Kevin Chamberlain, and it was a positive meeting, but one of the outcomes was a request that we work on our long-term capital planning.
yeah, and I would say that we have more of a long-term capital planning on paper than the town does. So I know they've done roads and some other things, but we have been working on that stuff.
Well, you might be right, but we can do more.
Absolutely. We need to go further with that.
And making it more public.
And making it more public, I think
I
is the
think
key.
that's the key.
Yeah.
We have a lot of documents, a lot of plans,
Mhm.
strategic designs, but
Yeah.
it's, making it public so that other people are tuned into it is. Anything else in response to the superintendent's report? Are we ready for consent agenda? Okay, then let's do it. So I know there's some changes to be made to the consent agenda.
I have an addition,
Mm-hmm.
the retirement of Deborah Brahm effective the end of the school year.
Okay. What other
I think that was a retirement, correct?
retirement? Yes.
And then we have Laura Rosenthal. You accepted her resignation last time, but I believe that it's been changed to a retirement as well.
Okay,
So just making that
so
change. So just
a
so
note on the consent agenda that
Yeah.
Laura Rosenthal is a retirement, not a resignation.
that's right. And
Okay.
just agreeing with that. Yep. And then in one of our retirees, you've already approved the retirement of Deanne Bartlett. She did have a request within her letter of retirement that if it was, asking the board to be able to provide her buyback at a time, I believe it was in the July timeframe, but basically within this cycle.
Right.
So that's just a request within
And-
there.
the buyback she's entitled to. It's just the
Yes.
timing of it. that
It's a
we're talking
timing,
about, right?
yes, that's right. Typically, when you retire, it's done by a certain time so that you can budget for that for the following year. In this, her buyback, and for that matter, if any of these other individuals who are retiring at this point in time have buybacks, none of them have been budgeted for.
Right, that's the key.
Yeah.
Having the money. Okay. So that one feels like,
We can pull that one out of the consent, basically,
Yeah,
and do
and-
it separately.
because that needs a discussion.
Mhm.
Okay, so on the consent agenda, we have the addition of the retirement of Deb Ron and that Laura Rosenthal's is not a resignation, but a retirement. Yes.
And I would like to have the field trip approval voted on separate than the consent agenda.
And you'd like that pulled?
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Okay. All right, any other changes for the consent agenda? Okay. Then I'll take a motion for the consent agenda as we've had those additions.
I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda as amended.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
John, you second that? Okay, Lisa made the motion, John seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? All right, 700 on the consent agenda. Field trip. So if I can have a motion,
Make a motion that we accept the field trip request.
thank you, Alicia.
Second.
Patty, second, thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? So that passes 601. All right. So let's have a discussion then about the buyout or the buyback. Timing. The timing of that. The request is that it's a year earlier than it normally would be.
Yes, there is a process.
Mhm.
It's in the JREA contract, and basically it says there's a time frame during which people who are going to retire in the coming year have to submit their retirement. And that allows us time to budget for that retirement because it does involve the payment of unused sick time and so forth. So that needs to be planned for. And can you tell me if there's exigent circumstances or is there something important that is associated with this?
There are no extenuating circumstances that have been noted apart from the fact that when you retire from the state of New Hampshire, the state of New Hampshire retirement is based upon your top 3 years. If a buyback comes back sooner, then it would be added into the average of that retirement. That's the logic behind it. But it's also, again, as you stated, the reasoning why you have to
Mhm.
budget for it as well.
Right, I was gonna say, normally there's a date. I don't recall what it is, but there's a date, right, where they're supposed to do it, which is like September,
I think
October.
it's October, but my October and November, different for different groups. So I
Right.
can't remember which one is which.
So that we can budget.
Yep.
And this came in last week, so
Mhm.
we didn't have that opportunity, that luxury of budgeting. Budgeting's a luxury.
So
Other thoughts? Yes.
yeah, I'd just like to make a comment on this, and I know there are different opinions on this, and I respect those opinions. But I do feel that when we can make an exception on that, that it would be a desirable thing to do. We are in a state where the retirement system is not particularly generous. Those little bumps that come from
Averaging these, yeah.
from days that weren't used, they're being bought back, can make somewhat of a difference. And so while we have to respect our own budgets and recognize that, you know, the kind of money that we're talking about could certainly have an impact. On the other hand, there are many years where we have that much flexibility in our budget. Now, how you decide that, I don't know. I realize that's complicated, but my own thought is that where we can do something for our teachers, that we should.
Mhm.
So, I just wanted to
Thanks, John.
express.
Other thoughts?
Is it with that, that was well spoken, John, thank you. Is it possible to table this discussion until June when we have a better sense if this is something that we can actually afford at that point?
It's a good idea.
We could, yeah, table it. I was gonna say the alternatively, we could make a motion vote and with a caveat in the motion. But we
I
can
would
table.
hesitate to do that because we might have other reasons to use any money that we have, like that I would hesitate to lock us into using funds for this if we have them. It seems to me that it would make better sense to wait and see.
Mhm.
You know, we've already, I think each of us earmarked any possible funds that could come to say, boy, it'd be nice to get this back, you know, so I'd hesitate to do that.
Mhm.
But June is a different month and that we really have a better sense of money right now. It seems really precipitous to say, let's use the money now. You know, I know I joked about the gas prices, but we can't
Mhm.
spend money we don't have right now. Yeah.
Other thoughts?
Just another kind of thought is that if it were to be tabled, it does provide a different board the opportunity to have the conversation too.
So
Can I make a motion that we table this proposal until our first June? Would we know by then? Would we have a sense by then? Like, what's the, I
It'd
don't
be
know
a
the timeline.
better
of money.
sense. I don't think we actually would know, but to the penny, but I think we would have a sense. Charlie, what do you think?
Well,
Would we
motion's
know?
been made, so.
No,
Okay.
I hesitated halfway because I don't know the timeline. I'm
Well-
looking for
Well,
timeline guidance.
From my perspective, okay, unless there's exigent circumstances, okay, then I don't want to deviate.
Mhm.
Because if the reason is just for someone to make more money, you know, why should that be different than any other teacher? I'd assume they'd all want to make more money, and I'd love for them to all make more money, but we need to budget for it, and if we haven't budgeted for it, then if we're going to come up with the money, we got to take it from someplace else. And at this point in time, I'm not sure that there's someplace else to take it because we're going outside for special ed right now.
Yep.
I mean, we're tapping into the trust fund.
Yep.
We don't know what this inflation rate's going to be. I mean, gas went up from, you know, 369 to 399 in a week. Fuel oil is through the roof. So at this point in time, I wouldn't want to commit to doing something like that.
Okay. So I don't think we need a motion for tabling. We just table the discussion, right?
But we would need a motion to deny it. Is that correct?
But that would take place, if it's tabled, it just
We
sits
wouldn't,
there
I don't think we need a motion to deny it. Okay, I think we need a motion to,
to act on it.
because I mean, we have a process and policy. And that is in place until we decide to change it.
Right.
So if we
So
wanted to
we
change
don't
it, we
need to
could.
Yeah, if you don't do anything, it just, the what's written in the CBA takes
Yeah.
place.
And we could still come back to it in June if we
Mhm.
get rich.
I, because this is momentous, agree with Charlie. And I feel like my last 15 minutes on the board for me to agree with Charlie. Like a special.
I didn't hear
A special moment. There are many teachers retiring this year who did not ask for this special compensation. And I think that to me speaks volumes. And why I think it's it's something to say, you don't know until you ask. Well, then everybody's just gonna ask. And we don't, that's against our policy. So and then we do this in good faith with our unions. And I think it's important to maintain that faith, and that these outliers and all these extra special requests, it's unfortunate that it even came to this, but there are other teachers who did not ask, and this person should not necessarily get it because they did. And so I also appreciate John's perspective, but the policies are there for a reason, and whether we can afford it or not is beside the point. We have a policy.
Accepted.
Sorry, that's just how I just,
No,
And may I ask a question? In this case, what is the reason for the policy?
I think the planning,
Budgeting,
right? So
yeah.
it's in terms of what, and I don't even know how we could have afforded it even if they told us in October. We're talking thousands of dollars that are not planned on the previous March voter, you know what I mean? So how do you make exceptions in these cases? Because we're not talking about 10 grand. We're
Well,
not,
if we knew about it in October, we could put it into our budget process, and as long as it's paid in the first month of the succeeding year, would come out of that new budget.
right.
It's just that, we have a large budget, and there's always some flexibility. No, not every year. This is looking like it's going to be a tough year. But usually there is some flexibility.
This is making me crazy, because we tell our students that there aren't as many places for flexibility and that they need to follow policies, and I think the deadline is there for a reason.
All right. All right. Thanks, Patty. Well, it's sounding like there's not enough interest to do anything at this point. Okay. So
does
that
the
So
state
there's-
say
there's no-
inexpedient to legislate?
we can right now.
You've been watching committee meetings.
I mean, we can right now vote and say no,
Mhm. You could vote and say
but
no.
I would need a motion.
You could vote and say, bring it back to us if you wanted to, or just direct us to bring it back later on, or just let's stick with our policy, which doesn't require any action whatsoever.
Okay, I'm hearing no motions. I think we're sticking with our policy at this point in time. All right.
Okay.
Moving on. Contract for the HVAC.
Okay, so this past Friday, we've been asking for EEI to give us a contract so that we can actually wanted to get it to you. There's nothing surprising. I mean, I shared with you already the amounts, nothing's changed. It's in the warrant article, et cetera. They're doing the work already on the other elementary schools. It would be very similar. It's going to be intrusive, significantly so at the high school because of all the ductwork that does not exist right now that will have to be put into place, plus the electrical system that will be upgraded here, just on the other side of this wall. Not quite as big as the electrical upgrade that Ringe Memorial School has to have as their one phase right now instead of 3 phases. but that's going to be taken care of. So those upgrades are being put into place. What we want to do is act as fast as we possibly can should tomorrow's vote go in favor of being able to do the HVAC. And so I have two motions. Carrie has the sample contract. We have a lot of things that we want to, before we sign it, to be in place. We had to do that with this last one as well to make sure that it was in the right order. But we wouldn't go forward and sign anything that wasn't a good document and didn't have all of their I's dotted and T's crossed. We've worked a couple of times with this company. But in order to do this, there are some things that we have to do. And one is we would have to have the board waive the bid requirements and allow the JRMS CHS HVAC upgrade project to go to EEI, energy efficient investments, and further to authorize the superintendent to execute the contract, all contingent upon the passage of warrant article 7, I believe it is. And then the second of those would be second motion would be to authorize, once that's done, entering into a 15-year lease purchase agreement with municipal leasing consultants for the JRMS CHS HVAC upgrade project contingent upon passage of warrant article 7. So that is what we're looking to do, so that tomorrow, once we find out, or on Wednesday, we start to make as much movement as we possibly can.
Right.
The lease one is the most important for speed
So
purposes.
do you expect to have all the i's dotted and the t's crossed and all of the issues with that contract resolved by the 21st?
I believe that we would. Yeah. I'm hoping to have it all done by the end of this week. We need to have as much done as possible to make sure that the leasing company is fine with moving forward. So the things that are missing right now, I'm looking for that the types of equipment aren't labeled in there. Like, yes, rooftop units, but leasing company is going to want to know what rooftop units. And I realize there's the issue with that is that there's a supply chain shortage, but you can say this or comparable or something like that. So that's what we're looking for right now. And then there were some other things that, apart from some grammatical errors, there were some things that, like they would say, and the scope of work is in section appendix 2, let's say, and it wasn't there. So that sort of thing, the page numbers, being off, scope of work is in the document, but it's perhaps not as detailed as it should be. It's very general. So there's some things that we're going to ask that are changed before we go forward. I mean, the description is all the same that we've talked about.
So if I don't know if someone wants to make a motion on one of these, and if we need further discussion, we can have it. But maybe let's pick one and focus.
Can I just ask how much of a precedence there is in the board waiving the bid requirement?
Doesn't happen very often with something this large. It's really like if we hadn't had this group working on our buildings already with actually all of these energy issues and them knowing the building and then them also doing the work that they're doing currently right now, we probably would have gone out in a different way. It's cheaper to keep them going.
This is a contract continuation, essentially.
Yes and no. It's a new contract. And the reason why it's a new contract and not the other contract is because we're not using federal funds for this project. We pay a whole different rate when we're doing this. Will be less expensive in some ways than doing it with federal funds. So you definitely want to have the separation of the projects, and they are written that way in our grants and everything else that we've done so far to make sure that there's separation.
So it's a continuation of service under a different contract.
Yes.
But it's continuation of service already underway. basically.
Yes.
Yeah,
the-
it's-
Doing the
it's-
HVAC,
it's-
just different funding pots.
They're doing some work right over there right now, or have done some work, need to continue to do some work in the middle school. You know, so that process will continue all the way through with those same devices. You know, we have gone out to bid with groups like this before. When we did the first energy upgrade, we had a couple other organizations. One of them, I'm sure, is large enough that they would bid again. Again, I almost guarantee the board would not go with it because they use proprietary units. Units that you would have to have very specific people working on them, and at a higher cost. Company's great, they know what they're doing. And then the other one that we had, you know, probably, it depends, they're probably, it was a little bit smaller, same size as EEI, and they're on the opposite side of the state into Maine as well, so there are only a few of them out there.
So with the, go ahead. I was just gonna say, would the proposed language be to, what motion am I making?
The proposed here, let me just send you something real fast. Are you in your email?
I can't, yes, now I am.
Okay, so
Is it somewhere in the email? I don't remember.
you now have an email that has the language.
It's like, what's the next step
Yeah.
here?
Yeah.
And to think we didn't have.
It's not coming through.
Yeah.
So Ruben, I think the compelling part that I would see for a no bid justification is the fact that we look very carefully at EEI, not only as they did their last project, but as we contracted with them to work on the two elementary schools. And they've actually begun the work on the middle school. To switch to another company at this point, I think would be risky in a number of ways. And I feel as though we did our due diligence
Mhm.
going through the federal and
Mhm.
state process
Mhm.
in hiring EEI for the first part of this project. But to me, that's a compelling justification for
Mhm.
a no bid contract for this second part of the project.
And on that note, this is a perfect lead into my motion. It really was. So I would like to make a motion, two motions.
One at a time.
Okay, I'm gonna do them one at a time. Don't worry. I gotcha. To waive the bid requirements and award JRMS CHS HVAC upgrade to project to energy efficient investments, otherwise known as EEI. And to further authorize the superintendent to execute the contract, all contingent upon the passage of warrant article 7.
Okay, we have a motion.
A second.
Christine seconded. Thank you. All those, any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? 700.
And my
Need
second
another
motion is to authorize entering into a 15-year lease/purchase agreement with municipal leasing consultants for the JRMS CHS HVAC upgrade project contingent upon passage of warrant article 7.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Patty. Discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Carry 700. Board committees.
Well, just to also
Okay.
note that I wouldn't be signing a contract and going forward if the lease piece
Yeah.
wouldn't work out. And so if we run into a situation,
One's dependent
yeah,
on the
so
other.
I
yes.
will not just sign that and then like, oh, by the way, we don't have any funding for that. So just to let you be aware of that.
That's good.
Okay.
That's really fiscally responsible.
Yeah, I
of you.
know, I know.
Thank you.
I figured, so, 4 million.
Yeah,
Check.
Yeah.
okay, board committee. Let's see, Have the policy, have you had
has
any?
not reconvened.
No? Facilities, have you had?
Well, the one thing that I wanted to report out on is I did have a communication with the engineer for the Roundabout project that
Oh,
will be affecting our students because of the foot transit through town. And they would be willing to come and meet with us if we would like them to. They'd like some input on what we'd like to know. But they suggested the April 4th meeting as a good time for them, if that works for us. And in relation to that, I would like to at least put on the table for discussion the thought that this could be an opportunity for us to, invite the public, let the public know that they're going to be here, and so that those who have a concern have an opportunity to to hear more about the project and to ask some questions. Because there has been a process in town, but it's not a process that's easy necessarily for parents to participate in because of the timing of the meetings that have been held and so
Right.
forth. So this could be a chance for that.
I like that idea. I guess I'm wondering, they want to know from us what it is we would like to know. I guess my first question is, what thoughts have they already put into this around how do they expect pedestrian traffic to function while they're working?
And that's a question that they have answered to some extent in the meetings that they've held where people have asked questions. But there are decisions to be made that they hope to make this spring, even though the project won't be built for several more years. And an example of a question would be, there is planned to be a traffic sort of safety island in the middle of the passageway across the street. So currently, for example, if you were at Rite Aid and you were crossing that street there over to where the Chinese restaurant is, there are 3 lanes of traffic there. 2 of them are coming south and 1 going north. And it's controlled by a traffic light. Well, now there will only be 2 lanes of traffic. And in the middle, between them, there will be an island where pedestrians can stop. Now that island, I asked how big would it be? And they said, well, it could be as small as 2 foot wide or as big as 4 or 5 foot wide. So that might be something that would like to.
Really small.
Yeah, too small.
Well, yeah, it is small, but that's not the main, traffic safety device, because that island I'm talking about, my understanding is it would be 12 foot back from the circle. So that's not very far. And once a pedestrian approaches that cross point, those vehicles have to stop. That's the law.
Then there's practice, yeah.
Well,
There are speed limits too, John, come on.
I think the chief of police could probably take care of that pretty well. Because we're not talking about a roundabout like in Keene at West Street, where we're talking about 2 lanes of traffic and the design. But anyway, those are the kind of questions we could,
Yes, 'cause
there is
I'm-
also the possibility of putting what they call like warning lights. You might have seen them at some roundabouts. Now, I'm not sure that that the Department of Transportation will want to do that there, but it's something that could be discussed.
And I'm concerned about what impact it's going to have on our busing transportation as well.
Yeah.
Very much.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, would it be also a good idea to simply shoot a message, if we are able to schedule this, shoot a message to a representative at our busing company and say, hey, by the way, this is happening. If you want to come, you are more than welcome. Yeah, you might want
Sure.
to hear about, let's open that invitation up to. I love the idea of making this something public come and
If the community
we'll
could, yeah.
dedicate some time to listen to this. I love that idea.
And what we want to do, obviously, is decide how much time we want to devote to it and, tell them that too, so they know.
Would they come with a bit of a presentation and then a question?
I imagine they would be glad to do that. Yeah, they have presentations that are pretty well done that they've used.
Song and dance that they've done somewhere else.
And I'd like to also know timeframes, not only planned timeframes, but realistic timeframes.
Timeframe for what, Charlie?
Construction.
Construction, what traffic impediments there are going to be during construction, and then how long will they be? And
Those are great questions, yeah. Now, they have been covered, like I say, there was a meeting the week before last, I believe. And some of those questions, like how will it affect the busing when it's completed, have been addressed. And in fact, one of the businesses in town was closed so that the roundabout could be made big enough to accommodate buses. The bar
Lab and
down here,
Lab and logger.
Lab and Log, right?
Bonnie, yeah.
But the question about how it will affect transportation during the construction is a good question. That's,
So maybe folks could give this a bit of a thought and maybe shoot some questions to John that he could then compile and send on to the folks, and with hopes that the April 4th, you said?
right.
How
That's-
long, if they were doing a presentation, how long would you recommend? You saw it.
Well, especially if we're gonna let the public know and give them a chance to participate. I imagine at least some people might be interested, so. I don't know, an hour? What do you think?
Thank you for facilitating this.
Okay. All right, so nothing else from facilities?
We're planning to have a meeting either on the 14th or the 21st, preferably on the 14th, right after the vote. It depends on whether Charlie's available and Ruben.
now I gotta make 14th. I just have to figure out what calendar I scheduled on so I can move it.
Yeah, and I might have a time issue there.
Okay.
Because we usually meet in the morning and I have an FPU meeting.
on the
I have
14th.
time, yeah, I have time on the 14th. I just don't know, I don't have it at 10, between 10 and 12.
What time would work for you?
12.
Okay, would 12 work for you, Charlie?
Just a minute, let me check.
He's gotta find his calendar.
This reminds me of that commercial where they're trying to have a shootout.
Yeah, I can do 12.
Okay, so I'll suggest that to John.
That's a
And
good
so
one.
yeah, make sure that's okay with John and get an email out.
All right, let me know. Then I gotta figure out what calendar it's on.
Okay.
Okay, finance. You had a meeting.
I wish we
unable
had
to-
lots of finance, but we don't.
We're lacking there, okay.
We're not scheduled for a meeting for a couple of weeks.
Right, but you had one. Did-
I think the last one we had was
Last one
before
we
we,
had
Before the last meeting,
Yep.
oh, I've got my days
there
crossed.
have not been a lot of committee meetings since
Okay.
the last time.
No,
Yeah.
no, I know. Okay, wellness, anything? No? What am I forgetting? Communication?
Education committee,
Well, I
which
know
we
we
know
didn't
didn't.
because we spoke at the last meeting about the
Mhm.
education.
Yeah.
stuff. The education, there'll be a whole new people on it, and I don't know who's gonna work with David to get the agenda. If you're
Let's-
still down.
I talked with David
And the-
and yeah, so obviously we need a new group.
Yeah,
But but it's
you should get the agenda going at least
potentially,
so that
but
you can get
yeah,
people
the
in.
agenda, I
Yes.
mean.
It's scheduled for the 10th, and we're not gonna have a meeting until
There's not gonna be a committee.
the 21st. That's the next school board
Yep.
meeting,
Right,
which will be the first meeting after the election.
but you could go.
I think,
And if Alicia gets reelected, she could go.
yeah, yeah.
I could go, yes, as long as it's limited to hour and a half.
I don't think we're ready for that.
I think we should probably.
Yeah.
Put it up.
All the energy has been
'Cause
into
we've gotta-
planning tomorrow's professional development
Yes.
session. Yeah.
Right.
We got a search committee meeting. Right, at 5:30.
RMS Principal Search Committee, 5:30
Okay.
in range.
So if there's nothing else to report on committees, I'll move on to public comments. Number 2.
Are you in a hurry?
All right, I'll put the,
No, I think we've been taking our time tonight.
So too.
I just want to say that my superintendent's report was a little shorter than what it has been
This
in
is
the
us
past,
to this. It's all us.
Lot less data. in
although
that.
quite heavy.
Do we have any public comments?
I don't see anything. If anybody wants to make a public comment, now would be the time to do so. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything.
Okay. Well, we've already talked about a future item, so I'll skip that one. Any board matters?
I just want to wish Jaffrey Range District Destination Imagination teams the best of luck at their upcoming competition this Saturday or Sunday, depending. And we can't wait to hear all about your adventures.
Great. Thanks. Anything else? All right. Well, if there's nothing else, then I need a motion to go into non-public so we can finish our personnel discussion.
Make a motion to go into non-public for purposes of personnel.
Thank you, Lisa.
I'll second.
Alicia, second that. Okay,
Roll call vote.
roll call vote. Yes. John,
Yes.
Christine,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Charlie.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I say yes. 700. All right, we're going into non-public.